Pen tests, are they effective? Why do companies get hacked left and right? Why Anthropic? Why do these things keep happening? Well, level 1, nobody knows how to basically solve the jailbreaking problem yet. We don't know how it works. We don't know how our brain works. And we created something that basically statistically emulates a lot of stuff. And it's able to go through an insane amount of information in a very short amount of time. That's two of the most impressive features I can attribute to a piece of software like that. Okay, it's not all bad. It's impressive. It's actually really impressive. On that note, I don't consider it intelligent, though. Okay. To be fair, there are a lot of people that live their lives and have the same and work the same way. Okay, it's not intelligent at all. They just live. Okay. However, what does this have to do with pen testing? Well, pen testing these days is split into a number of lanes. You're probably going to realize something by the time I finish this, which is when things started, a pen test included a vulnerability scan, a phase where you exploited the environment, you analyzed the threats that the environment had, and you created a chain of events leading into how far you could get. In the process, you would do AV bypasses, and a lot of other stuff. Okay, a pen test would last 3-4 weeks, sometimes more. Actually, more sometimes. A lot of cases, almost reaching like 25 days, 20 days, 3 weeks, 3 weeks and a half. At times, if the company was big. But the goal was to have a complete idea of the threat of the environment, and over the process of the next year or two, someone would work with that report. It was quite beefy report, right? And so we would work with that information over time. And this one was and they were quite expensive. Pen tests had a decent amount of pay at that point in time. And a lot of things happen. You would find days during the assessment. You would publish a lot of papers based on the work that you were doing over the time. And a client would have a pretty beefy amount of work to deal with. And would also do things like AV evasion and a lot of other stuff. Vulnerability scans were incredibly expensive considering the economics at the time, which made it so that companies would not spend cash on vulnerability scans over time. Now, as technology started to coalesce, some of these things started to get cheaper. So it's basically the strategy was to basically, if you make more scans. So security as a whole, let me rephrase that. Security as a whole had a problem. You need an impressive amount of skills. The tools were expensive. People were expensive. And this does not scale. Okay, this does not escalate. So you had a lot of intrusions. You had a lot of work to do in a post hack case. And it makes the whole entire operation seem basically useless. So what do? You make some of the tooling more accessible. You make some of them cheaper. And so companies internally started to absorb some vulnerability scans and adopt other techniques like scanning regularly, having an idea of their footprint, and all those works, which meant the work now doesn't include that because some of the companies actually do that on their own, which means the pen test is slashed. So instead of 3 weeks, you have 2. Okay. And that went on for a while. Okay. You would have to play with exploits, and then Metasploit came in. They did an amazing work and it changed a lot. You don't need to know assembly anymore. You might need to play with the payloads a bit. These days you have to play with the payloads again. But you have to play with payloads again. You have to do the AV evasion, but you don't need to go through and validate the exploits and carry around 2 or 3 hard drives full of VMs. and pay an insane amount of licenses for all the stuff that you have on those VMs. That changed. Your gear is lighter. You have less time, which means nobody's paying for 3 weeks anymore. Probably 2 weeks. Okay. The work, pretty much the same. Evaluate the weaknesses, create a kill chain, own everything you can find. But now you have a problem. You're going to need to pawn everything, but you're going to drop the kill chain. You don't have time to think about a threat when all you need to do, if you have to evade the AVs. And with the AVs picking up, the technology picking up, and with the fact that everyone's using the same base, meaning most of the same payloads now, it makes it easier to fingerprint, which means a lot of the AVs didn't get really effective. They got really effective at finding and identifying the tools that we all use. So there's a conundrum. AV bypass has become a secret. A lot of people work with that, but still a problem, right? Now, so what happens? That's not a problem. The reports come out / the work is not really achieved, and someone says, okay, this is a security assessment, so we're not going to work, we're not going to worry about AVs. If we can do it, we can. If not, we can't. Okay? The whole cycle starts again. A lot of companies get hacked, and security assessments are effectiveness are questioned once more. So what do? You identify a number of threats, the threat actors and the threat groups. You categorize them. You split and organize the kill chain into multiple groups, and now you're going to have the threat emulation. The threat emulation is a long assessment. The goal is to see how far one can get without getting noticed. OPSEC is crucial. You need to work your way into the environment without getting noticed. Something that this report shows that did not happen. Okay. If this were to be the case, if they leverage a local AI, their OPSEC would be a lot better. So that's one of the reasons why I say this is probably a test. Trying to assess the land. Now, threat emulation is created. Now, the widest possible scope, and everything's on the table. Okay, phishing scenarios, engaging directly, breaching the building. And we're not just talking about systems anymore. We're talking about everything that composes all assets, living or not, machines or not. The entry, the way people get into the building is also questioned. We're talking about the threat. Every threat is different for every business case, and it makes this completely different. So what I'm describing, in case you didn't notice, is the old way of doing an assessment. Okay, the difference is right now we can also describe this as something that escalates like a staircase, right? You start with something that allows you to, can you manage your own environment and have a grip at the vulnerabilities, and that's why the window we're talking about here is at play. Then let's work with the telemetry. Let's work with the assets. And that is where also the AI is being used. Okay, SOC operators are quite expensive. They go through a lot of burnouts. There's a lot to be expected from them, and they're drinking from a fire hose. Okay, they need to paint a picture in the timeline based on the telemetry that they're getting. They're getting a lot of stuff, and so any help that can give them is amazing. Okay, and the tools that we have these days are quite effective at it, but it's still a lot of noise. AI can help here into telling things, but the problem is, as long as the human is in the driving seat, it can act as a tunnel vision for that, and it creates a very interesting threat. If you create a smoke screen with a high rate of events, everyone's going to be, this is going somewhere pretty. So you focus on that, you might lose track of something that might also be happening elsewhere, and only after the fact you're going to see it. You know, and this is where I say something. Most of these companies are getting hacked. The easiest way is to question the effectiveness of the security assessments as a whole. The security assessment business has a problem. Has a problem with scalability. That's why everyone is seeking, since the beginning, of a tool that can help this thing escalate. Vulnerability scanners, SaaS tools, static code analysis, dynamic code analysis, anything can help to bring stability. If you have 10 pen testers, they will likely to find different things based on their skill. That for a business is a problem. Especially considering that their skill is valuable. Okay, an exploit is quite expensive. They were made expensive by the defenses that we put in place. Everything has a side effect. What we're seeing here is the propagation of something and allowing something to acquire tools and capabilities, and realizing now that might backfire really fast. So security assessments are effective, but they have the effectiveness like anything else. If you're doing an assessment just to rubber stamp the end of the year, and if you're doing 5-day assessments, you're spending money. I have to be realistic on this. You're just spending money. Okay? A really effective security assessment needs to give you an idea of where something that you need to work on for an extended period of time. Otherwise, if you go through your environment, you'll know exactly how many patches you're missing. That's not difficult to assess. You know all the passwords you're using. You know if you're using bad ones. You know if you're using credential reuse. You know if you have a luminar enabled. You know if your environment is prone to man in the middle. Right? What you don't know is how fast can someone find a threat in your environment. Okay? How effective is your SOC? How burned out is your SOC? How understaffed are you? Can you manage an incident response? Can you find out that you got hacked? Do you know how many employees are at risk of selling your the credentials for their environment? That is a TTP level threat. The first ever red team I made, I got my initial access by buying the credentials for the environment on a coffee shop from an employee that was complaining about the company. And he actually helped me to set up the VPN on the coffee shop on the very same day. So, and it was not that expensive. Okay. When the scope is wide enough, it's not a question of will you get in? You will get in. And generally speaking, you don't need AI. You need people. So, this was the episode. Still unsure if this is going to go up on one because it's 39 minutes here. Take a look at these. A lot of this thing is basically a PsyOps. Just be careful about it, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay frosty.